Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Jennifer Miller, Executive Director of the American Heart Association in Westchester County, New York. Before we get started, I just want to review a few housekeeping items. One, please, if everyone could keep themselves muted, that would be great. Please do use the chat feature to ask questions and make comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you're comfortable being on camera, please join us. We'd like to see your faces. At the end of the presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. So at that time, if you want to come off mute and ask your question personally, you may, or go ahead and use the chat. Welcome to the Saving Active Hearts webinar on what parents need to know to protect their young families from sudden cardiac death while playing sports. The goal of tonight's presentation is to empower parents with the information they need to speak with their sons or daughters' schools, camps, recreation, or private sports leagues in order to ensure that the programs have been prepared for a sudden cardiac arrest. Dana Calisante and Alice Schoen partnered together to start Saving Active Hearts after each one of them experienced life-changing events due to sudden cardiac arrest. Both have become passionate advocates for promoting bystander CPR and the importance of having an AED, or automatic external defibrillator, accessible at youth athletic programs. Dr. Krista Miliaresis, a pediatric cardiologist at Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital, has joined their efforts to help develop a community outreach program called Project Adam, which will ensure that and provide resources to Westchester County, New York schools and communities for developing AED and CPR programs. Let's get started.
He was the guy that everyone liked. He was the student that all the teachers wanted to have in class, and to have his potential cut short is, I think, is the major shock to everyone.
The Roane County High School community remembering one of their own Saturday, gone too soon.
There are no words that explain what happened or why it happened. And I think that's what people are struggling with right now. It happened so suddenly. It was in the front of everyone. 1 minute we're getting ready for the second quarter, and the next minute we're shocked.
Under the Friday night lights, Rowan County senior Alex Miller collapsed during the game. He was rushed to Charleston for medical treatment, but died shortly after. Now, less than 24 hours later, his friends and family gathering at the high school to grieve together.
He was my best friend, no doubt. He was the brother I never had. He was that guy for me. We hung out every day. We rode around together. There was rarely a day where you'd catch me without him.
Alex's friends describe him as kind, compassionate, and outgoing, always putting others before himself.
A really great kid. Yeah,
Very good Christian,
he'd go to
outgoing.
church every Sunday.
Schools from across the state sent counselors to help those already on hand at Rowan County High School. Neighbors from both near and far stopped by to pay their respects and show support as well, proving that on this day, everyone is a Rowan County Raider.
It doesn't matter where you're from in West Virginia. It doesn't matter what kind of rivalry you have going between your schools. When it matters, people stick together.
Hi, I'm Alice Schoen. I'm grateful my son survived his cardiac arrest. On December 27th, 2017, my healthy 17-year-old son, Jordan, collapsed and went into sudden cardiac arrest during a varsity basketball game. This actually happened right in front of my husband. Thankfully, I was not at that game. Jordan is alive today because of two spectators: an off-duty police officer who ran to his car to get his AED, and a teammate's father, a doctor, immediately started CPR. Although there was an AED present in the school, as is required by New York state law, no one from the host school was running to get it. I'm not sure if they didn't understand the gravity of the situation or simply weren't trained on how to respond. We actually still don't know what caused Jordan's cardiac arrest, but he now has a defibrillator and a pacemaker and is doing well in college. This is a picture of Jordan taken just minutes before he collapsed on the court.
Hi, I'm Dana Colasante. 7 years ago, my husband Dave had a sudden cardiac arrest while playing in a parent-child scrimmage with my then 11-year-old son's travel soccer team. There was not an AED near the field, and none of the parents or coaches present knew CPR. When Dave collapsed, a dad on our team remembered that a friend of his who was an emergency room doctor was on an upper field, so he ran to get him for help. A mom sitting in her car saw the commotion and, without really knowing what was going on, ran into the school nearby, which happened to be open on a Saturday, to grab an AED just in case it was needed. The ER doctor saved Dave's life doing CPR and shocking him with that AED. The stars were aligned that day for us. We were so lucky that parents reacted so quickly, because the reality was that the school or the teams were not prepared for a cardiac emergency, and the ambulance did not arrive until after Dave was already revived. 4 years later, our small town experienced the scare again when Alice's son had his cardiac event. It's bad enough when this happens to an adult, but unimaginable when it happens to a child. You never think something like this can happen to you or someone you know until it does. Soon after that, Alice and I joined forces determined to save lives. We were very fortunate to come to meet and be able to work with Dr. Krista Milaresis, who is our medical expert here tonight. She is up next to share her story and explain exactly what sudden cardiac arrest is. And please stick around to the end of the presentation because she'll be here to answer any of your questions.
Hi, my name is Krista Milaresis. I'm a pediatric cardiologist from Boston Children's Health Physicians and an attending at the Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital. I lost my mom as a kid to sudden cardiac arrest, and I became a pediatric cardiologist because I didn't want what happened to me and my family to happen to anybody else. I am doing the work that I love my kids, who you can see on this screen, and for yours. When I met Alice and Dana and I saw that we shared the same passion, I knew that I needed to be part of their team. We became the first New York chapter of Project Adam, together with the help of the Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital under the guidance of Dr. Michael Gowitz. Our goal is to help schools and communities develop a cardiac emergency response plan to educate kids and adults about sudden cardiac arrest and what we all can do to save a life. I'd like to talk a little bit about what sudden cardiac arrest is and what it is not. Sudden cardiac arrest is the #1 killer of Americans and the primary cause of death in young athletes. Sudden cardiac arrest is not a heart attack. It is an electrical problem that causes the heart to malfunction and to stop beating. Cardiac arrest is triggered by a heart rhythm disorder or an arrhythmia that causes the heart to stop pumping effectively or stop pumping at all. And therefore, we cannot get oxygen-rich blood to the brain, lungs, and other organs. Seconds after an arrhythmia, the person becomes unresponsive and either stops breathing or does not breathe effectively. It can appear that they are gasping. Death occurs within minutes if the victim does not receive treatment. So a cardiac arrest is an electrical problem. Conversely, a heart attack is a circulation problem. A heart attack occurs when blood flow to the heart is blocked. When a blocked coronary artery prevents oxygen-rich blood from feeding the heart that is normally nourished by that coronary artery begins to die. Symptoms of a heart attack include intense chest discomfort, shortness of breath, cold sweats, nausea, and possibly vomiting. More often, symptoms start slowly and can persist for hours, days, or even weeks. Unlike with cardiac arrest, with a heart attack, the heart does not stop beating. However, the longer a person goes without treatment, the greater the heart damage. The link between a cardiac arrest and a heart attack is that a heart attack can be a cause of sudden cardiac arrest. The statistics show the alarming reality of the risk of death from a sudden cardiac arrest in children less than 18 years of age. One child suffers a cardiac arrest every hour of every day of every year. That's over 7,000 children suffering a cardiac arrest per year. 39% of the time, it is related to sports. And unfortunately, 90% of the time, sudden cardiac arrest leads to death. But according to the American Heart Association, the quick action of bystanders performing CPR and using an AED can triple the chances of survival in the victim. These are the causes of sudden cardiac arrest. Several of these don't present with any warning signs or symptoms prior to the cardiac arrest. The most common cause of sudden cardiac arrest in athletes is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is an abnormal thickening of the septum or the middle of the heart. It is the most commonly inherited cardiac disorder. It is inherited in an autosomal dominant fashion, meaning that if a parent has a gene that causes HCM, there is a 50% chance of one of their children, their children developing HCM. And that's why it's so critical to know your family history. Unfortunately, sometimes the first presenting sign of one of these conditions is a sudden cardiac arrest. However, when present, the following symptoms can be fainting or dizziness with exercise, excessive fatigue or shortness of breath with exercise, chest pain or chest discomfort with exercise. As I said earlier, heart abnormalities in families or a sudden unexplained death in a family member or even a seemingly explainable death due to a car accident or drowning can be a factor that identifies a child at risk for sudden cardiac arrest. Some heart conditions that may cause a sudden cardiac arrest can be detected with an EKG or echocardiogram. Parents of children with risk factors or warning signs should consult their pediatrician to see if they should get a more comprehensive screening with a pediatric cardiologist prior to their child participating in sports. Recently, there have been reports linking COVID to myocardial damage. The AAP has based guidelines that are published, based on symptom severity regarding which children should receive comprehensive cardiac screening prior to participating in sports.
There are three main steps to saving a life from cardiac arrest. Call 911, do CPR, and shock with an AED. According to the American Heart Association, immediate treatment, including CPR and an AED, should be administered within 3 minutes of collapse to be effective. Even the fastest EMS might not be able to reach a victim this quickly, which is exactly what happened in my husband's situation. We later learned that because the 911 call came from a cell phone, it went to a far off call center instead of going directly to our local EMS. So if you can call 911 from a landline, make sure to immediately provide your location to the 911 operator so they can quickly route your call to the nearest EMS to your location. We were very lucky there happened to be a doctor the day on the field when Dave had his cardiac arrest. Otherwise, I don't think the outcome would have been the same. And that is why prompt action by bystanders is so critical and why it is so important to have AEDs on site and as many lay persons trained in CPR. And now we're going to take a time out. We have Diego from the American Heart Association who's going to demonstrate hands-only CPR.
I'm out. Hey everyone, it's Diego Ortiz with the American Heart Association, and I want to show you a 60-second hands-only CPR tutorial. First thing you do, you want to call 911 and make sure that you keep them on the phone. And the second thing you want to do is put your hands together, lock your arms, and start pushing hard and fast in the center of their chest. Remember to keep 911 on the line. You want to keep talking to them until the emergency paramedics arrive. They can even walk you through how to use an AED or remind you of your chest compressions. You can even practice at home. Like here, I'm using a yoga block. I want to practice on something a little bit bigger. I grabbed this water jug, about 3 gallons. And it's pretty good to practice. So we could teach this skill even during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now you have what it takes to be a CPR hero. Time in. If you're out on the street, you should have a mask on. And recently, like a lot of people, I started wearing it too. If you're ever in a situation like this and someone does need hands-only CPR and they don't have a mask, you could even put a mask over their face or potentially even just use their t-shirt just enough so that they don't get droplets out on you or vice versa.
Thanks for being our hero, Diego, and showing us how to do hands-only CPR. The chart on the screen illustrates why it is so important for as many people as possible to know CPR, as there are very few CPR and AED requirements by law in New York State within youth athletic programs. When Alice and I started doing our research, we were shocked to find out that AEDs and CPR are not required in any recreation or private athletic league outside the school system. Camps are not required to have AEDs. They are required to have a certain number of staff members certified in CPR on campus, but those staff members are not required at physical activities or sports activities all the time, other than maybe at a pool or a lake where lifeguards are required. While New York State education law mandates that schools have AEDs at all school athletic events and coaches certified in CPR and first aid, it does not mandate for schools to have cardiac emergency response plans, which is a written document that would outline specific steps to prevent death from cardiac arrest in a school setting. No athletic programs within the school system or outside the school system are required to have cardiac emergency response plans. We were also shocked to learn that game officials, such as referees or umpires, at any level of play, whether in the school system or outside the school system, are not required to know CPR. The lack of protection in youth athletic programs motivated Alice and me to start our Saving Active Hearts initiative. Our mission is to protect young athletes from dying from sudden cardiac arrest by creating awareness and advocating for cardiac emergency response plans. It has become evident that preparation is essential to saving lives. Our goal is for all youth athletic programs to develop a cardiac emergency response plan to make sure that they are prepared for cardiac arrest. This plan would include easy access to AEDs at all games and practices, prominent signage of AED locations so anybody present can find them, and at least 2 qualified adults, whether it be athletic trainer, coach, game officials, present at all games and practices that have successfully completed a national accredited CPR and AED training course.
We are also suggesting that at the start of each game, while the game officials are already meeting with the coaches and team captains to review the game rules, that they also include a brief review of what to do in a medical emergency. This will minimize the delay in providing the immediate and appropriate care, knowing that every minute counts in saving a life. This very simple action would include answering 3 potentially life-saving questions. Where is the AED? Who will perform CPR? And who will call 911? I want to go back to Jordan's story for a second to reiterate that no one ran to get the AED that was just outside the gym doors. If this review had occurred before the game, then the coaches, game officials, and trainer would have been better prepared for his emergency. Dana and I developed this card to be used as a reminder of what should be reviewed during this meeting. Our idea is that the card could be laminated and attached to the coach's gym bag. So what can parents do? There are simple steps that you could take that will make a difference. When you sign up your child to play in the league, ask if anybody knows CPR. Ask if there will be an AED accessible at all practices and games, and see if there are any emergency protocols in place. Don't be surprised if the answer to any of these questions is no, but there are many resources that you can offer to give to the league. First, you definitely want to educate them on the risks of a sudden cardiac arrest. The American Heart Association offers a ton of information on their website. They also offer CPR training for a brief hands-only CPR instructional video to a 4-hour full certification class. You can also offer to give the league a template of our pre-event medical review card. I definitely also encourage you to reach out to your local EMS. They are a wealth of information, and they also may be able to provide CPR classes and also suggest places where you should purchase the AED. And when you go to the games, look around, see where the closest AED is located, and definitely take a CPR course yourself. The risks of sudden cardiac arrest has become a national concern, so much so that the NFL produced a video as part of their Play Smart, Play Safe campaign. This 10-minute video reiterates everything we reviewed here this evening. We're going to send you a link to this video along with other resources as a follow-up to tonight's program. I encourage you to watch the video and share it with your kids, coaches, and leagues.
We hope we've impressed upon you the real risk of sudden cardiac death in youth athletics and how some sports programs might not be prepared for cardiac emergencies. As a reminder, sudden cardiac arrest is the #1 cause of death in young athletes. CPR and use of an AED should be provided within 3 minutes of collapse to be effective. We urge all parents to ask their children's sports programs if they're prepared for cardiac emergencies. And we urge all of you to learn CPR. It can save a life, most likely someone you know and love. That concludes the formal part of our presentation. But first, Alice and I would like to thank Jennifer Miller and the American Heart Association team for their continued support of our Saving Active Hearts initiative. And a special thank you to Krista for being our medical expert and always supporting our efforts, and for Diego's CPR demonstration. And also thank you to all the parents who joined tonight to listen to our presentation. We hope you've learned something, and we will look forward to answering any of your questions. Thank you.
So we're opening the program up for questions at this time. If anyone has questions, you can put them in the chat box or come off mute and ask your question. I do want to remind everyone that this program is being recorded, so be aware of that and maybe not share such a particularly personal medical situation, but please feel free to ask your questions at this time. And I'll start us off with a question. Can I hurt somebody while I'm doing CPR chest compressions? That's always a concern, and it's one that question that I'm asked often.
Do we have our, I feel like we asked, is it Kenny to answer that?
Kenny.
Kenny, do you want to answer that?
Kenny,
Yes,
do you want to ask that question?
Hi, sorry, didn't know if that was specifically for me. Yes, so normally during the course of CPR, there's always a potential for injury, but the occurrence is actually very low, and with proper hand placement and proper technique, it's usually avoidable. So it's something that is with oxygenation of the heart and brain being the most important thing to do. The low occurrence of injury is not something that should dissuade anyone from making the attempt.
I actually want to introduce that Kenny is from our local EMS here in Rybrook and Portchester, and he has been an incredible source of information here for us in all of our efforts. So he's definitely, and he offered to come on tonight to answer any questions that he may be able to help us with.
Dr. Milarisas, is there a recommended cardiac screening for young athletes?
Wow, so this is a controversial issue. I've been doing some research on this myself. It depends on what country you're from. So in America, the only guidelines that we have to go by are the 14-element AHA, AAP endorsed pre-participation evaluation. So that's basically, you would go to your pediatrician and hopefully they would hit certain historical and physical exam points. And unless you answer in a way or they have a physical exam finding that gets them concerned, you won't get a referral to a cardiologist. However, in Italy, for example, they screen all of their athletes starting from 12 years of age every other year using an EKG, an echocardiogram, and a stress test. And some really seminal papers were published between 1999 and 2006 showing that they reduced the risk of sudden cardiac arrest in their population by 89%. So again, very controversial issue. I'd love to talk about it some more, but it would take an incredible amount of time, like a stack of papers like this big I could give you.
Can you address, am I liable if I injure somebody while performing CPR?
All right, I'll answer that one. Not that I'm a legal person, but there are good Samaritan laws in place that protect layperson or non-medical people from not being liable or sued if they hurt someone. The idea is that as long as you have good intention to try to save a life, you can't be liable for that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that information. Is it better to wait for EMS or start chest compressions immediately?
Immediately. Sorry,
Kenny?
I answered that. Kenny. Immediately. Kenny.
I concur. Chest compression should be started as soon as possible once the event is recognized. Time is brain, time is heart muscle in these when these events occur. So the sooner the better. The 3-minute time frame is ideal But certainly, even if there is some reason that that the start of CPR would be after that, it still may prove extremely valuable in giving that person an opportunity to survive their event.
Thank you. With COVID, are there restrictions about CPR classes that are being offered right now? And I know, Kenny, you are a trainer, and we also have Rebecca Rabinowitz on our meeting tonight. And I think you both offer CPR training. So if you can share that information in the chat as well for everyone. The question was, are there restrictions to having CPR classes offered right now?
There are some limitations, obviously, with group sizes and doing in-person classes, but the hybrid options are available, which does significantly reduce the in-person time that's necessary. And there are now, I believe there are completely online courses that can be taken depending on the exactly what the level of certification that's being asked for.
Rebecca, did you want to add anything?
Oh, yes, I did. As Kenny was saying, we do our very best to keep things safe. And if it's required to have in-person, we do have in-person, but what we try to do is create a Zoom class that is very informative and interactive. I like the person was showing the wonderful compressions on the jug. We do everything we can to use interactive tools like that. But when it's required to do in-person, we do an additional, but very safe in-person where it's PPE and social distancing and very few people practicing at one time. But we always include the use of the AED because it's so important. And I just love hearing how important it is to athletes because we're very enthusiastic about making sure that everyone knows how to use an AED, not to be afraid of it. At the right time, of course. Be afraid of it at the right time. But yes, we have to be really flexible right now.
We are just about out of time, but I do see one other question. Can you please review the major signs in which CPR would be necessary?
Yeah, so it's very, I think the number one thing that I want everyone to remember before they leave is I'd much rather hear that you started CPR on a person who didn't need it than we lose a life. I think if a person is gasping or not breathing effectively or not breathing at all, if you know how to take a pulse and there's no evidence of a pulse, or even you just put your hand on top of their chest and you can't feel any cardiac movement. But the bottom line is just start CPR, call 911, grab the AED, call push shock. It's really, I'd much rather you be embarrassed that you tried to save a life that didn't need to be saved than to lose someone.
Okay, I think we may have captured all of the questions or responded to them, at least in the chat. Thank you very much. Alice and Dana and Krista, I'll give you the last word if there's anything else you'd like to say.
No, I mean, just thank you so much for taking the time to be here tonight. I hope everybody has walked away with, at least one piece of information that will be helpful going forward. And Dana and I are going to reach out to everyone and follow up with some helpful links. Some of the information we shared with you this evening. Please feel free to reach out to us if you wanted to talk about developing a cardiac emergency response plan in your community, in your school. So hopefully we could share all the information we've learned and that you will never actually ever have to use. But the most important thing is that you have to be prepared, and to be prepared, and that will help save a life. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you.